Teachers of Reddit, what was your "how are my students this dumb" moment? One of my 16-year-old students asked, while starting a multiple-choice test, if it mattered what letter he chose. I just stared at him. Sometimes there are no words. I'm baffled. I need a follow-up. Did he figure it out? One of my other students said, "Yes, dumbass, there's only one right answer." He then facepalmed and said, "I'm a moron." I didn't respond to either comment, LOL. He caught a case of the stupid that day. "Are mermaids real?" followed shortly by, "I don't believe in dinosaurs." She was 16. Once had a girl who thought there were people living on Venus. We just couldn't talk to them because they didn't have phones. I mean, you can't prove it's not true. I teach swimming lessons and lifeguarding courses. During one, I was trying to teach them CPR, and instead of showing them first, I told them to show me what they already knew about it. I then proceeded to observe 15, 16 to 20-year-olds do the weirdest shit to those poor training dolls. My favorite though was the kid who did a 2-foot jump onto the chest of the dummy. The dummy slid out from under his feet like a cartoon banana and he landed on his rear end on the pool deck. Good times. Asking a bunch of 16 to 20-year-olds to show you what they already know using a life-size doll sounds risky. I have a poster on my wall that says something about not believing everything you read on the internet, and it attributes the quote to Abraham Lincoln. Student said, "Wait, did they have internet back then?" I once told my students that there was a time before the internet, and they all laughed like, "We know! We're not dumb!" Followed by, "Wait, so how did you get data on your phone?" Facepalm. College instructor, you would be shocked. Just last year, multiple students can't save Word docs as PDFs. Students take smartphone pictures of every single slide while I lecture, even though I upload them to our LMS. Personal favorite. When asked to insert a picture into a Word document, one student prints the Word doc, prints the picture, puts the picture on the Word doc, takes a smartphone picture, and uploads the file. Miss my millennial students. I asked my students to write a sentence and give an example. One of the students, age 12-13, asked, "What's an example?" Actually really hard to explain. Give me an example of an example. Don't know if this counts, but I was the a-hole for a semester in grad school, never again. One student submitted this paper I will never forget. Basically, the author was wrong because the student found the argument boring. In explaining the author's argument, he got most points wrong and then proceeded to say he had a better argument. His argument was the author's argument. Now that's just special. During a spelling test last year, I said a word 3 times and a student asked, "Miss, how do you spell that?" I asked my class of 5th graders what city they live in, and the first response was Texas. Plot twist, they lived in Michigan. According to Wikipedia, there are at least 9 towns in the US named Texas, as well as 2 named Texas City. Most of them are unincorporated, which usually, but not always, means the whole town is not much larger than a gas station across the street from a Denny's. A classmate of mine in elementary school had this exchange with our teacher. "What's the answer to this multiple choice question with 3 choices? A? No. C? No. I don't know." Me, I'm thinking of a fruit that is yellow and very sour. Student chickenpox. Coach, our bio teacher was talking about menstrual cycles. What is that? 9th grade female. Coach, I walked into the weirdest women's restroom. There were toilets with no stalls. I couldn't figure out how to pee in them. You walked into the men's bathroom. Those were urinals you saw. Oh. How do men pee in them? Same 9th grade female. What is Vladimir Lenin's first name? 8th grader, I replied, Joseph. Does a male octopus have 8 testicles? 9th grade boy in history class. The 2 from the female student just seem like the school system has failed her greatly in sex ed. I'd like to blame the parents as well. I was taught the birds and the bees by my mom at 8. Starting junior high, I was forcibly given a small fanny pack with clean underwear and a couple of pads for when my first period would start. Did I use it? I sure did. She's a freaking genius. One of my 6th graders had a brain fart moment. Couldn't remember the word for suspenders. Called them farmer straps, complete with hooking his thumbs through his imaginary suspenders and moving his hands up and down, like an old guy wearing suspenders might do, and I laughed so hard I cried and almost fell out of my damn chair. A friend of mine forgets words all the time at work and whatnot. His crowning jewel is pointing at an ambulance and struggling a bit before producing panic van. I teach on the college level and students try to convince me dumb stuff is true a lot. At least once a semester a student will try to fight with me saying Africa is a country. Last year I was the a-hole for gender studies at a reasonably well-ranked university in the US. I asked students to write a short story about how life for humans would be if we reproduced in a different way and how it would affect society. For example, we grow our babies in jars in the hospital. How would that affect society? I told them not to write anything they wouldn't want their old lady teaching team to read. I got 4 pages of explicit spider norpography. Why can't I shake the feeling that they just turned in something that they were already working on? Not a teacher, but was helping my friend who's the a-hole go over some first-year essays. It was an essay about video games, and aside from the format being non-existent, one of the first sentences was something along the lines of, "There are many examples of video games, such as the Wii and PS4 and Zelda." Unfortunately, she wasn't allowed to grade any papers below 50%. He got a 50%. Why would someone not be allowed to grade a paper below 50% given the example you just gave? The practical difference between a 50% and a 0% is basically non-existent. You don't pass below a 60 anyway. But making it easier to pass can make the administration look more competent on paper. Not a teacher, but one freshman in my class took a rip of his vape and got caught by the substitute teacher. He tried to deny it by saying he could make vapor out of his mouth with nothing else. I wouldn't call him dumb, but I did stop and stare at him thinking it was a joke. When I was student teaching last year, one of my students made a comment about the 52 states. I corrected him and said there are 50 states, and he asked me if I remembered to count both Washingtons, as in Washington and Washington, D.C. I'm not a teacher, but I work in a school. Every semester at least one class comes into my computer lab to take a test on the computer. The teacher reminds them all that no sites other than the test page are allowed. There's always one kid who pulls up Google the first time he doesn't know an answer. It's like clockwork. Edit forgot to add we have software to see computer screens and the students are told this. Habit, I guess. Not a teacher, but a girl in my college bio class asked, "If a woman doesn't have a uterus, how does she go to the bathroom?" I'm not a teacher, but in my IB Math Studies course, we spent a good hour and a half explaining to a group of girls that you can't divide anything by 0. It was frustrating to watch them try to argue that you can divide 7 calculators into groups of 0. My teacher just couldn't comprehend the people he had to deal with. None of my students have ever been dumb, but they had brain farts at times. I was teaching in the East End of London in a school that was 98% Bengali. I had one lesson about our names and that they have meanings to our families, culture, or in other languages, etc. I shared why my name was what it was and the meaning behind it. Some children were sharing about their names. One of my students got very excited and yelled out, "What does my name mean?" The whole class did a face palm. His name was Mohammed. That's a valid question, though. Muhammad may be the name of some long-dead dude, but that doesn't mean the name itself can have a meaning. For example, George is a common name in Britain and a few British monarchs were named George. Yet it also has a literal meaning, earth worker, or farmer. Same with Jonas and Jonah. You might be named after the dude who got swallowed by a whale, but your name comes from the Hebrew word for pigeon. I am a teacher now, but this happened when I was in medical school. The only way we would ever be let off from attending something mandatory was if we had a sick leave from our hospital. So naturally students got really good at lying about having diarrhea and migraines. But if you had too many of the same complaints, the system would flag it, and you'd have to complete a lengthier evaluation, and your parents' guardians would be notified. So one kid had the idea of faking appendicitis. He faked all the signs and symptoms so well, he was after all a medical student, they almost took him to surgery. Yes, let me fake something the only cure for which is emergency surgery. This is a classmate of mine. During English, she asked if she had to spell her name in English. I live in Belgium. During biology, we watched a documentary about the ocean. When a manta appeared, she said, "Look, that bird can dive." She said that she's a vegetarian because she Only eats meat she likes. When talking about climate change, she was saying that our class is full of horrible people because we don't do that much for the climate. When we asked her what she does for the climate, she said she doesn't do anything for the climate because other people need to do that. She thinks she's the smartest girl in class. I teach intro geology. I gave a lab quiz on the density and buoyancy lab we had done the week before. One of the questions asked how are we able to build ships out of steel, considering that we measured steel to be more dense than water the week before. Almost the entire class gave variants of, the ocean is so big compared to a boat, that all the water is able to keep the boat afloat. As an answer. I get some version of this answer every semester, but it really struck me because so many of them put it. And they weren't just copying each other. This school happens to be right next to a bay. So I took a large, uninteresting rock from the prep room and marched the students outside to the bay. I said, this rock is about 8 kilos and has a density of about 2.4 GCC. But according to your last test responses, the bay is so big that it should float. I threw the rock into the bay, and we all patiently waited for it to bob back up to the surface. Do you have a similar story? Leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more videos like this one.